Hello and welcome back. This week on the Wealthy Wellthy Podcast, I'm trying something new. I interview Emily Rose, who in addition to being an executive entrepreneurs coach, a best-selling author, a contributing writer on Thrive Global, and who holds a degree in psychology from Harvard University, Emily is also a Wealthy Wellthy Money Mindset coach. Yes, I know Emily well, and I have the pleasure of working with this amazing woman daily. My initial goal for this conversation was to introduce you to Wealthy Wellthy's newest team member, but Emily and I quickly dive deep. We discuss Emily's very unique journey to this role, her impeccable coaching qualifications, and the evolution of her relationship with money. Most importantly, we soon start talking my language, the language of money. We talk about why it's important to have an expert financial coach, if you want to be rich, that is. We talk about the wise money method and how it changes money mindsets, and why combining the two helps people become financially free and happy. So if you love to talk money like Emily and I do, you will definitely want to listen to this entire episode of the Wealthy Wellthy Podcast with Wealthy Wellthy's money mindset coach, Emily Rose. Emily Rose, welcome to the Wealthy Wellthy Podcast.
Thank you, Christina.
All right, this podcast is one of a kind, so I'm super excited about this. I'm so glad you said yes. And what a fun journey that brings us here to even have this conversation together. So we'll share a little bit about this. But before we get into the nuts and bolts of why we're really doing this podcast, I want to know more about you. Share with me the Emily Rose journey. Where did you grow up? Tell me a little bit about your childhood and what got you to kind of the work that you've been doing over this last decade.
Yeah. So I grew up the first 10 years of my life in the Bay Area in San Francisco. And I was a serious pre-professional ballet dancer. So I was like in training to become a professional ballet dancer from the age of 4. And then my family, when I was just about 10 years old, moved to a little town in Oregon called Corvallis. It's where Oregon State University is. And the training there was not quite the same. And so I would go away every summer to San Francisco or up to Seattle, and I would leave for 3 months and I would go get training and I would go back to Oregon. But eventually I had to make a decision when I was 16, whether or not to go professional or not. And by then I had developed another passion for actually, I wanted to be an FBI agent. I was like, okay, if I can't do ballet, I had to make a decision. And I chose to stay in Oregon rather than leave my family and go professional and move back down to California. And so I was like, okay, like if I found this passion for, being an FBI agent or working in forensics or something, then maybe there are other things in the world that I could be passionate about as well. And so then I went on a journey of I became a police explorer in high school and did ride-alongs with cops and had a little outfit and, worked parking lots and things like that at events, and went into college under criminal justice as a major. Decided it wasn't enough just to catch the bad guys anymore. I wanted to prosecute them. So I wanted to actually go into law and work for the prosecutor's office. But then at the very end of my first year of college, I had a professor that changed my life. And the class catalyzed for me an aha moment that all of the things that I was thinking about that were kind of things that I wanted to tackle, being a FBI agent or being a lawyer, these were Band-Aid solutions to a deeper problem. And that the real problem was suffering. The real cause of violence and the terrible things that happen around the world started at an individual level with internal suffering. And for whatever reason, right? Like violence is perpetuated in families, and it causes suffering in individuals. And so what I realized is that what I needed to do was tackle the root issue. And that ultimately, like 10 years later, led to me becoming a coach. And I spent the last 10 years as a coach for high achieving professionals, entrepreneurs, CEOs, and helping. I worked in the realm of business on the personal side. I did business coaching as well, but it was really about working in tandem with practical business growth strategies and the internal of who you need to become to be a leader, to grow companies, to make change in the world. And that there was a lot of internal work with that, which included the reduction of suffering in relationships and in the self. So that's the journey I've been on.
And in your travels, so where have you lived? Tell me some of your journeys. Like, one thing I've just really loved about you is you're such an explorer and so curious and always learning and growing and so open-minded and looking at that next level of understanding or growth. And there's never a mindset about you that thinks that I've learned everything. It's like, no, there's the next iteration of of excelling at this or understanding it deeper or being able to expand, my consciousness. So where did all that come from, and where is that taking you throughout this journey you've been on?
Yeah, it's so true. Yeah, so let's see here. So, excuse me. Are we gonna be able to edit stuff like that out? So, during in my let's see here, around 2009, I was a waitress for I became basically a professional waitress for 10 to 12 years. I was a waitress, 10 years, and then on and off for the last couple of years. And I eventually went to massage school. I became a massage therapist. That was my first official business. I specialized in Reiki and Lomi Lomi, which is a Hawaiian healing art. It's where I learned Ho'oponopono when I was in my 20s. And so this is where the esoteric started to come into my world. Started studying spirituality and romantic relationships to start to break my own patterns and habits. And at that time too, I hadn't finished college. I quit college when I was younger, and I had always considered going back, but never too seriously. And then at that moment in my life, in my mid 20s, I had the opportunity to potentially get a degree from Cal Poly. And Cal Poly was like a school that many of my friends had gone to, and it's a pretty elite school. And so to think that I could actually, as a young adult, go back to school as an adult and get a degree from Cal Poly, I was like, that's very tempting. But at the same time, I had already had one of my other major aha moments, which was that I needed to travel. I needed to go for the first time in my life to other countries and experience specifically tropical islands around the world. That's what I was really drawn to. And my intuition was just telling me, go, go, go. And so then I had a decision to make. If I was going to follow my intuition and go and travel, or if I wanted to capitalize on this incredible opportunity to get a degree from an elite school and finish my degree. And I chose to go with my intuition. And so the first stint of travel I ever did, I lived in Hawaii for 7 months working on sailboats as a catamaran sailboats as a first mate, and helping people snorkel and experience the island. I worked on this hippie whale boat that was amazing. That was like clothing optional, vegan potluck. Everybody brought potluck stuff. People every week we would go out and we would have famous musicians from all over the world would come. We'd have one per week, and we'd go and commune with the whales and the dolphins, and play didgeridoos and crystal bowl vibrations down into the water in the deep blue. And the whales would come around the boat, and we would have like this microphone that we would drop way down into the water and then project the whale song on top of the boat, and we could hear the whales. It was just amazing. Anyway, so I did that. I went to Vietnam. I traveled. My first international travel was alone, traveling from down the countryside of Vietnam from north to south over the course of a month. I lived in Costa Rica for 3 months, went to Panama. I traveled around, and I made that decision to change my life in that way, to live more more minimalistic, and for 2.5 years. And then I settled in Chico, California, and I started growing my coaching practice there. And then I had the opportunity to, then all of a sudden, the opportunity to actually get a degree from Harvard came across my lap. And so I did then choose to go back to school, and I graduated from Harvard with a psychology degree in 2019. And 2 years later, started traveling again. So I'm in the middle of living a nomadic lifestyle now. It's been a couple years, and I travel all over. I actually travel on an app called Trusted House Sitters, and I kitty sit around the country, and it is a global app, so you can do that around the world. It's really cool. So cat sit everywhere I go.
Love that. And so what do you think, like how is your travels like living differently? Like you've lived your own life. You haven't followed the linear path. You've made money, you've done well financially, even as you've shaped things the way you wanted to shape them for you without following suit. How has these travels shaped you? And tell me some of the highest of highs and share some of the lowest of lows.
Wow. Oh goodness. Yeah, my external journey has probably been equivalent to my internal journey. I've definitely the lowest of lows and highest of highs. Sometimes those go hand in hand or flip flop right from one to the other. Some of my highest highs, dancing naked on a beach on a private island in Panama alone, with coconut trees my height, so I could grab the coconut right off, and alone, naked, bashing that coconut open on the corner of a rock and drinking it and pouring it all over myself while singing about how much I love my life, and looking at an ocean that is just as blue and clear with all of its critters underneath as the ones that you see on the Apple screensavers. That was, it's like one of my highlights. Like, and so many more, so many more. I'm so grateful for the life that I've gotten to live. Some of the hardest times were, heartbreak, like falling in love, or what I thought was love and realizing it wasn't, and falling flat on my face and in humiliation and pain, and then having to take months to do the introspection to figure out what got me there, and what who I was and who I was being, and where my blind spots really were in those circumstances. I have many, many stories that I can tell on both sides of that spectrum. And I'm actually writing a memoir to do so. So, yeah.
I love that. So in the travels, tell me about coaching and business. Like, tell me about like I said, I just see you as the perpetual student. So tell me about some of the people you've studied under and what you've dedicated yourself. I love that you, again, what I notice and see about you, you really work to, the word that's come, excel, but excel's not the right word, but to do things exceptionally, to really learn, to not learn superficially, not just to dot the I type of thing, but to truly understand, to truly embody the knowledge, and to truly use it to the best way possible. So, and I really appreciate that. I guess the opposite of that is not looking for the shortcut. It's going full in, and so many people are looking for the shortcut, or they get 75% of the way and quit to not 100%. But you go the 100%, even if you need to slow down and take the time to do that. So share some of your learning journeys, like, who have you studied under, and what was the work, and how do you use that today?
Yeah. And specifically related to business.
Yes.
Yeah. My business journey started with education from a company that is now defunct called Big Vision Business, but it was a really great place to invest my time, money, and energy in educating from. Simon, Simon, I can't remember his last name right now, but he was the kind of the CEO of that company, and had developed really great courses on how to build one's own courses or practices. So service-based business, and sell digital courses. And so when I became a coach, I invested a lot with that company, and spent years like learning from them, and that getting that sort of more internet marketing, scalable digital product approach from the get-go as a coach was really helpful. And yet it also like wasn't my path. And so I perpetually burnt out, which is a whole other part of my trajectory and why I'm not going down that road anymore. Yeah, so it also led to burnout. And so I studied, so part of my business study, I'm going to move my mic because I'm realizing this is recording and you're putting it on YouTube. So now you can see my face. Hi. I would say that part of my business study also has lived in the esoteric. I studied a lot of manifestation is one way of talking about it. Quantum physics is another. Pseudoscientific quantum physics theory, things from, Deepak Chopra. I studied a lot of Deepak Chopra's work back in the day. And so I started to learn how to consciously create my reality with my mind through really honestly, like authors were most of my teachers for many, many years. So Eckhart Tolle and Deepak Chopra were really influential to me when I was in my 20s. But eventually I started studying specifically money manifestation, and through lots of different authors. Joe Vitale has some really great books on that. I'm probably going to blank on some of the people that I've learned under through authorship right now. But then there's the practical side of it all as well. And I specifically with money, and I wound up money in business. I wound up studying. So I got into, there's a assessment called wealth dynamics, and it's all about so some of my esoteric study, I really liked looking at everything from yin and yang. So I studied yin and yang a lot. And wealth dynamics is an assessment by Roger Hamilton, who is the author of The Millionaire Master Plan. Wealth dynamics is an assessment that allows one to understand where their genius lies, and therefore where flow is. The more you work from a place of your genius zone, the more you can hit a flow state. Csikszentmihalyi is a psychologist who talks about flow state, who created the concept of flow state. And this assessment helps you understand where your flow state lives. And therefore, and when you're working in your flow state, not only does time fly and things like that, but money also flows to you more easily. It's where you can build your wealth from. And it was such an incredible tool. And I loved how it took Eastern philosophy and mapped it onto basically Western business culture. And so I got really into Roger Hamilton's work in the last years of me being in business, which was a few years ago. And I ended up making Roger Hamilton my mentor, going into their high-level masterminds, becoming a certified trainer in a lot of their programs. And that was kind of that was the first mentor I had and the last mentor I had. So I kind of gave you the bookend of that, but in between there where I learned a lot as well. And I guess actually let me rephrase this. I would say you were the last mentor that I've had, because then, I took what I learned in Roger Hamilton's courses, not just around money, but around business. I applied those for years. In the last few years of my business, I applied all my digital marketing skills in the last few years of my business. Eventually, when that all came to an end, when I decided to shut down my business, I still had money habits and patterns that continued to leave me living month to month. So while for almost the whole decade of being in business, I made great money, I still lived month to month, and I couldn't hack it. Like, no matter how many courses I did, how many, people I hired. Profit First is a good example. I dove into that at some point. Then I hired a Profit First CPA, I opened buckets. And yet I still couldn't somehow break the habits. And so eventually, after years of hearing about friends who'd gone through your program and how much they loved it, one of my besties just looked at me and she was like, "You have to do this." And I was like, "Okay, done," and so then I learned from you.
And here we are. Awesome. Thanks for sharing all that. So, there's a few things in there to unpack. And, one thing I'm listening is, well, first I have a question before I go down that stream of consciousness. So when you say you're a coach, how do you define a coach, and how would you be? And the reason why I ask this is because it appears these days, everybody's a coach, myself included, right? Like, let's call me a financial coach, if you will. But it's just, I don't know. And it's everybody's a coach. And maybe it's just because I'm kind of in the coaching world, but it seems that way. So how would you distinguish like a real coach, an exceptional coach that actually, can get in and change people's lives, break their ceilings, break their limitations, help them truly succeed, and those that call themselves a coach? Is there any differentiator that you can define?
That's a really good question. Let's see. I would say that it's a big, I have a kind of like an overarching, let's see, I have a vantage point after being in this industry before everybody was a coach, that I can see a lot. And like, one of the things I see is that a lot of people who call themselves coaches, let's say specifically in internet marketing, like internet marketing trains people to position themselves in certain ways. And a lot of time in internet marketing, people who call themselves coaches aren't actually coaches. They're like consultants or trainers. They're educators. And I would call you a trainer, Christina. You also are a great coach. I have received, when we do the one-on-ones, you have coached very well. Coaching is about asking questions. And I know that in the times I've come to you when I was in your program and gotten on the call with you, I'm coming to have you give me answers, and you do not. You give me some answer and you ask me questions. And that is really great coaching. And overarchingly, you're a trainer because you're in front of, a group of people and you're teaching. So that's why I would that's where these are some of the distinctions I would make. And so it depends. So the other thing I guess I kind of want to say about the industry in general is that in business, coaches are taught, people in the coaching industry are taught to market themselves as experts in an area. So what is your expertise? And then you become a coach on that area of expertise. And actually, real coaching isn't that. It's just, but it's also not marketable. And so real coaching in its like, I don't know, like truest form is very akin to therapy, where you're not actually coming with anything to educate on. You're coming to hold space for someone and just ask questions. And so it is actually a big deal to distinguish what real coaching is, because there are institutions that are certifying coaches. And when you mix that with the business world that trains coaches to come at coaching from having an area of expertise, it muddles what coaching is. And so your question, which I love, was, how would you distinguish between a coach that can actually get someone results and other coaches. And actually getting someone results, it depends, I would say, because if as a trainer or a coach, you have sold yourself, your services, your business, to get someone a very specific result, such as increasing their wealth, then how you would determine how great someone is at that is different than how you would determine if like you haven't sold an area of expertise and someone's coming to you for kind of more ambiguous coaching, like spiritual coaching or something like that. Someone that's coming to just like get to know themselves better, self-actualization. You wouldn't want to drive them towards a goal. You want to just open a space for them for self-exploration. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. All right. So with like I said, another thing I heard there is where, I hear people get tripped up, and in my work all the time is people identify, let's say if they are a coach or just a practitioner, there's that like, hey, I'm certified or I've been taught as a coach or a specific type of practitioner, Reiki specialist or an acupuncturist or a coach or a realtor, like whatever it is. It's so that's to your point. It's a specialization that, but then there's this other piece too, which is the business side, which is like, how do I then be a coach, but then turn my coaching into a business where there's the business side out of just being a coach. And that's what I appreciate what you've done too, is you've done a lot of rigorous study on business, and what allows you to be a good business coach is you actually have studied business and have built the business infrastructure for yourself as a coach and can help then other business people can coach them and help them with by understanding like, hey, there's these aspects of business that you can't see that I can see. And I'm going to help coach you through these things that you may be missing. But it's another big piece of understanding that there's not just, when it comes to money and this part of it, there is the business side of it. And it sounds like you've done, you've put in your 10,000 hours of understanding, like you said, digital marketing and building all the aspects of the business.
Yeah. I love that. Basically, so one of my favorite old school business books on this topic is called The E-Myth Revisited. And it distinguishes between someone who is a technician, which is somebody who works in the business, such as what it is that they do, like the coach who coaches, or the real estate person who sells real estate, versus the entrepreneur, which is the person who works on the business. So in the business versus on the business. The entrepreneur is the person who runs the business and who, or in your terminology, one of my favorite things about Curbs for Business was your distinction between entrepreneur and business owner. So let me rephrase and call it a business owner versus an entrepreneur. So a technician versus a business owner, right? And that's what you're looking at, is like how someone who is a technician, somebody who does the thing, like how to help them financially and mindset wise become a business owner, right? Yeah,
exactly. All right, well, let's segue into money. So so you said something really important there, and I think let's use this as our pivot point. And I mean, I'd be curious. I just got off a podcast before this actually, and he helps people like energetically clear old stories. And so, but interesting, even though people come to him all the time with their problem, for example, a business problem or personal problem, I asked him, I said, so out of all this, work that you do with, hundreds of, people on a kind of a monthly basis type of thing, when it boils down to it, like what percent have money problems? And he said, oh, Christina, 90%. So it's coming now. Money is kind of a symptom of a different problem, but I just found that very interesting that that people are coming because they have a block, like, hey, I can't get my webinar filled up, or hey, I can't, nobody, I can't quite get my course all the way built, or I can't attract enough clients, so it's coming in all these different things, but at the end of the day, they're just not making enough money.
Right.
And it's just, push and push and push. And obviously I'm in that vantage point all the time. But what you said, what I notice, the kind of the fundamental issue is what we call month to month. And with all the stuff out there, and with all of the programs and all the coaching and all the education and all the business promises that I can take you from 0 to 6 figures, or I can take you from 6 to 7 figures. It's just all these, that's what's being sold, right? And so it's like, who do you buy from? And all of the marketing out there, Jane Doe, John Doe, you can just line them up side by side. And I'd be curious if we lined them all up side by side from all the business promises out there, the people that are making these promises that say, I can take you from 6 to 7 figures, for example. Regardless of all that, the thing is that the problem is this month-to-month thing, that we think that the answer is to go from 6 to 7 figures. And the answer is, how do I get off the month? The question is not, how do I go from 6 to 7 figures? The question is how do I get out of this month-to-month yo-yo, this income yo-yo, and or this month-to-month, that no matter what I do, like to what you said, after all this training and after all this business stuff and after studying all this money manifestation, how the hell am I still month-to-month? But that's what people don't realize. Like, we're not understanding that this dilemma we're in is what I call the month-to-month dilemma, but we're unaware that that's the problem that's wreaking so much havoc on our emotional and financial lives. Yeah,
Definitely.
So let's talk about that one thing that you said, and it's going to get us here to talk about how why even you and I are on this podcast together.
Yeah.
So for everybody listening, just a little bit of a story that Em has been through both my Curbs program, which is my money mastery program, and my money mastery for business program. And so, like we've talked about that, I've been Emily's coach. And so she set up, I'll let you tell the story. I'll give just a little bit of background, but I'll set up this part that she called me and said, hey, Christina, can I have a session with you? And I'm like, yeah, of course. So we set up this session, and I'm thinking I'm going to be doing a coaching session with Emily. And it came back in a very different, unexpected form. So share a little bit about that, Emily, and then we'll take it from there.
Okay, sure. Yeah. So I mentioned burnout. I burnt out many times over the 10 years that I was in business, and then wound up starting to write a book about burnout and teach the body of work that I accumulated over those 10 years. And then I burnt out on writing the burnout book. So I stopped that too, and decided to scrap the whole coaching thing. I was like, okay, I need to not be done. I need to like reorient on how I identify my identity, essentially, how I identify myself inside myself. And so I went through, so a couple of years ago, I started a process that was, I call it my existential midlife identity career crisis transformation transition. Because it was all those things, very much so all those things. So over a year I went to some very I would say dark places, but they weren't depressive. They were just a lot of emptiness and stillness. And I, by the time I came out the other side, I was like, okay, like what actually matters to me? Basically it was total existentialism. I went to this place of like, okay, nothing actually inherently has any meaning. Right. And it was actually a subset of existentialism that I got to, because existentialism is what so many of us entrepreneurs believe, which is nothing has any inherent meaning. So therefore we give things meaning. Like it will mean what we make it mean, right? Well, I got down lower than that, and I now am at what's called an absurdist, which is nothing has any inherent meaning, and also any meaning we give it is also meaningless. So nothing really has meaning at all. So from that place, I was like, okay, well then I'm not going to exit this earth plane. Like I'm going to stay in this body. What do I want to use this life force energy for? And art was one of the only things that I could identify as actually seemingly worthwhile to me to put my life force energy toward. Other than I do really care about animals, but that's sort of just a side thing that I just really have a lot of feelings about. But so art. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to change my identity from entrepreneur and coach to entrepreneur and artist. And then I was like, okay. So I started down that path, and then I was like, well, I actually I need to I want to be making money also in a way that feels really aligned. And I don't want to put the pressure on my art creations to be where that, money source is generated from. And so I was like, I started to do the thing I always do when I look at where I may want to produce income for myself from. And I looked back, one of the things I did is I look at what is it I already spend my time on anyway. And through the entire year of doing literally nothing, there were, periods of time where I would just sit or stand if I didn't feel the impetus to sit. It was pure nothingness. Yet I still did my curbs program. I still every week would go into my books, and because I was so passionate about applying finally what I had learned and was seeing progress on it, was like, gosh, after all these years, this thing has actually like I'm changing my patterns, I'm doing the thing. And it was just so exciting to be doing. So it was like the one thing I always did was curbs. And so as I'm taking this life, evaluating how I'm spending my time, what is it? I was like, okay, so obviously I spent my time doing the curbs thing. And then I was like, okay, well, there were aspects of being in business that I loved. Sure, I loved coaching, but you know what I also really loved was making sales, actually closing the clients, taking the money in was really fulfilling for me. I was like, okay, so, and then I was like, okay, if I'm really honest with myself, love making money. I love making money. I love playing with money. I love having money to play with. I like having money to run through this system. It feels so good every time I receive money. I love it. It feels so great. That's why I'm so good at making it. Wasn't good at keeping it, but you know what? That's changing. This is great. And so I just did this complete, there's a word I'm looking for, but I can't think of it, but inventory. I did an inventory of how I where I could, and I was like, okay, I think I know Christina at the company well enough. I'm like, I think this could be an asset for them. What if I could do sales for Wealthy Wellthy? And what if I could, do money mindset coaching for Wealthy Wellthy? Then I could be in the money conversation. I could be having accountability around continuing to learn and apply and grow my practical money consciousness and skills, and actually start building the wealth and gaining the assets that I actually would like to, and making investments. And so, yeah, I asked for a call with you, and your face was hilarious when I was not actually looking for your advice on anything, and instead pitching you to work for your company.
It was classic. I just remember okay, yes, and I was not expecting that. So here we are. Thank you, by the way. And there's a lot of there to unpack outside of just, obviously you're on the Wealthy Wellthy team now, and we're going to have so much fun together and have big plans together. There's a couple of things in there just to, I think a lot of people have found themselves or finding themselves in that place of transition, or what is my next identity, and I want to say that proud of you is not the right word, but in a way, because what I found, so many people, especially, they're hitting their wall. I just see that there's so much, I don't know, belief that I have to be an entrepreneur. I have to do my own business thing to be worthy or to be accepted, or have to make my money at this. And and a lot of it's like, because we don't want to go to the big corporate job and job and different things, and maybe we've escaped that. So a lot of people do go in to get coaching degree or certifications and things because they want to get out of the rat race. They don't want to be in that corporate environment anymore. So this is a way to get some autonomy and that type of thing. And I think what's not told is that entrepreneurship, it's hard. And it costs a lot of money and a lot of time to get it to work. And then it's really easy to get burnt out because you have to do it day in and day out. And you have to get up and make the donuts again and be the technician and be the business owner and figure out how to make the money, and how to pay everybody else. And then, oh yeah, I have to pay myself too. And I see people will just keep pushing it and pushing and pushing it because they don't even know that there's an alternative. And, something that what I really appreciate what you've done is like, hey, I don't have to push that anymore. I don't have to go do that thing over here, but I don't have to push this way to make this business thing continually work that I'm burned out on. I just don't even have the passion to do that anymore. What else is there? And what you did is you crafted an offer and something you got really excited about, and actually kind of had the courage and just came out of the blue and said, I've got something random. And you pitched yourself, and here we are in this real win-win hybrid of like an entrepreneur type possibility. And it's just, I think that can be a real example of different possibilities when we might be in a position of like, I don't want to run this thing on my own anymore. I don't want to be the one pushing the boulder up the hill anymore, but I'm so talented and I've done the work and I know what's required and I know how talented I am and what value I can bring. And can I bring that elsewhere, that it can be a real win-win while I can, do these other pieces now. So I just really want to acknowledge that.
Thanks. Yeah. Well, I will say, that it requires an enormous, a true like ego death, well, at least it did for me. I didn't intend for the ego death. The ego death happened because of the whole transition I was in. The ego death in this field anyway. I'm sure I could kill off a few other ego in a few other places, but yeah, like, because I never would have been able to do this, or even I like, in my mindset prior when I was an entrepreneur was exactly what you're saying. And it was, I can see now, attached to, it was attached to some core wounds that I healed through that, the last couple of years. And so, but because where my need to do it myself, or like, have my own, like, personal brand based business, because of like where the need to like succeed going down that trajectory came from, which was kind of core wound driven to some degree, that like the motivate, like it wasn't aligned. The motivation was off because it was coming from shadow, which is like, I needed to prove to myself essentially that I could do it. And hence, burning out, hence, just like having it not work out, and also not being able to know that I needed to do something different as far as like lead generation or something, such as aligning with other entrepreneurs who are doing it bigger and better than I was. And that's where like all the people are. It's like, okay, well, let's go. And, kind of like what we're doing now to some degree. I never would have been able to do that before because I needed to prove to myself that so yeah, I mean, and also, by the way, your previous podcast person, you said something about like energy clearing and stuff. I worked with somebody who is an energy clearer through my transition out of my past life business and all of that. I worked with someone for years, maybe quarterly, that she's amazing. She does energy clearing at a distance. And I attribute a lot of like me being able to deal with these shifts and these transitions to that work too. So it's all of it,
Absolutely. All right. So let's talk about, like you said, you've read all the money books. You've been a student of money for a long time. You do have a love and passion for money. You've got a great mindset about money. And so why we ended up on this podcast, I think it was just a couple of weeks ago, which was, I said, oh my God, we should do a podcast. Let's talk about this, which is why we're
Yeah.
here. But what you said to me was, Christine, I don't know if you know this, but I've done all this money work. Like I've studied for a decade. I've read all the
Hmm.
books. I've done programs. Um, I've
Yep.
been very intentional about learning this money thing. But even with all done the profit first, was a trainer with money mindset. I've been a trainer with money mindset, like certified training, have done well coaching in the money space, all the things.
Hmm.
Yet despite all that, I was month to month. And it wasn't until I took the Curbs program after all of that that I finally saw my financial situation shift and my money start to grow,
Yeah.
where even when I was making less money, my money was growing.
Yeah.
Curbs is the only thing after all this that allowed that to happen. And I
Yep.
said, oh my gosh, that's what it does. But I don't think, obviously unless people have been through it, they don't have that experience and they can't understand how it is different and why it works. So to wrap this up
Yeah.
here, let's talk about what is it different that when you went through this Curbs program, because one of your besties said you just have to do it and you just said, all right, hands up, I'll do it.
Yeah.
What is it that you learned in the program that one obviously changed your financial situation where your money for the first time is growing and you're way out of the month to month, and then two has you to a place where you can coach it and train it to help others in the month to month get to the place where their money is growing.
Yeah. 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 So basically, yeah, after trying over and over and over and being very aware of like the how to get out of the month to month. I mean, I was able to teach that years ago because I understand it very, very well. I've again, yeah, studied for a decade. Like, so I could help others do that help business owners do that to a certain degree prior to Curbs, because it is actually there's a lot of stuff that lives in mindset around that. And especially if you're looking at it from a business perspective, it's there's a way to apply scalability to that, but you can't scale before that. Actually, anyway, so but aside from all of that, personally, what actually made the difference for me was so the one thing that made the biggest difference was actually applying what I learned. And that sounds so simple, but it was the practice. So there's something in Curbs that you learn to do called sweeps. And it's sweeping money from your one account into a variety of other accounts. And first of all, knowing how much to sweep into each account is required to do sweeps. But it's really not just about knowing how much money to sweep. It's about why. What is that? What are those accounts, those buckets? What are those driving toward? They each have a different purpose, and to understand so thoroughly, like what the purpose of each is and how some of them attach to longer term goals has a why behind that action of doing the sweeps monthly makes so much more sense, and there's so much more reason to show up and actually do the sweeps. And so it's the why behind taking that action that allowed me to consistently take that action. You tell a kid like, you know, that like, don't touch the hot stove, right? It's like, oh God, okay, I guess I shouldn't touch the hot stove. I have no idea, like there's no sense making behind it, right? But it's like if you're like, don't touch the hot stove because if you do, you might actually really burn yourself and that could hurt and it could leave a scar and it could da 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 da. Like, oh, maybe that's why I wouldn't want to. I don't know, that's probably a really bad example, but having like some reason behind doing something, I think attributes, yeah, motivation to taking an action. And so, but it was the practice of the sweeps that changed things in my bank account in a way that never, I'd never seen happen prior, consistently. So, yeah, so that's one thing. Do you want me to pause or do you want me to keep going?
Yeah. So let's talk about when you give specific examples. And so something that we talk about in Curbs is where every dollar has a purpose. And when we give it meaning and we give
Mm-hmm.
it a purpose and we give it a why, it gives us different emotional connectivity to the money, and then the money beyond just the money, but it's that we work hard for that money. We've given so much of our energy and our life force and our help and all of that out, that we get a thank you basically in the form of money. So we can hold that as almost sacred. It's a sacredness of our holding ourself, which is a love of self almost that's built into this. And then
Mm.
we're looking at each dollar, and then you said now we're going to give it energy, and we give money energy by giving a real purpose, giving it something to do, and saying, hey, here's your job, go kill it, go make this happen, right? And so in that, now we're creating this different relationship where we care about it. But now, like you said, the why behind that is the money has these different jobs. So talk about specifically, when you're talking about these buckets have goals, what do you mean by that? And what are these buckets? And what causes that then, that inspires you to want to make sure that you put money, you give that money the space to live that purpose?
Yeah. Happy to name all the buckets and break them all down. Or I could just talk about the one that like means the most to me,
Yeah, what
which
means
would,
most to you?
okay, cool. Yeah. The one that inspires me the most is it is a self-love thing. It's actually it's it's my present self caring for my future self. And to be in a position where I am taking care of myself in the future is so powerful. So there's a bucket called the invest bucket. And one of the things that Curbs does, and which is part of the why and what I'm talking about when I say that, like for me, the purpose behind doing the sweeps is high motivation, is because what Curbs does is it helps you get to what's called your sovereignty number, which is the amount of money that you need to have in a compounding interest, that is compounding interest. So in investments that are compounding interest investments, where by the time you stop working, you can take out a percentage every month and live off of that percentage without that number ever going down, that sovereignty number ever going down. And so what Curbs does by the end of Curbs is you've gone through all of, oh my gosh, an overhaul of literally everything, everything in your habits, your spending habits, your money mindset patterns, everything in your current accounts. You're reconfiguring all current accounts, building new accounts, and looking at all past, present, and future numbers. So literally all the numbers, you're looking at all of it. And so by the end, and it's a lot that we go through, but by the end, we're looking at that future number, that number that we're building towards. And you can take it into account your net worth currently and figure out the gap between your net worth, your current net worth, and your future sovereignty number. And that's the number that you're driving towards then to create for yourself. And so having that is like, okay, well, if that's what I need for my future self, if I don't want to be working when I am 70 something years old, 80 something years old, there are lots of people in the world, a lot of people who will work until the day they die. And I don't want to be one of those people. So I want to be able to stop needing to make money at a certain point. And so if that's what I want, and how do I want to live once I stop creating an income, like through work, how do I want to live? How much money do I want to spend per year? And so having those numbers is like, okay, now I know what I need now to take care of myself in the future. I know what my future Emily, who's no longer working, needs to be making, needs to be like pulling from that investment account every month to be living the lifestyle I want to live when I have no fresh income coming in. Yeah, that's the invest bucket.
Yeah,
Wealth bucket.
the wealth bucket, and like you said, it's about sovereignty, which is choice.
Yep.
Like real autonomy and choice. So beautifully said. And we teach a formula. How important is the formula? Because a lot of this is that, we're told, oh yeah, we should save and invest. Everybody knows they should save and invest. It's not like that's a novel concept. So, out of all the people who come to me, it's not like it's like when I say, oh, you should save and invest, like, oh, I've never heard that before. The hard part is knowing how much to save and invest, and then having a practice to make sure that you do save and invest.
Mm-hmm.
So talk about like the prescriptive methodology of the prescriptive nature of like how to, like I say, anybody can do a Rubik's Cube if you know the formula.
Yeah.
But anybody can become financially independent and wealthy if they know the formula. But we don't have the formula. So,
Right.
and we don't even have any type of map for getting there. So talk about that. How was that a big part of
Yeah.
changing your situation?
Yeah. I mean, even more basic is like knowing the difference between savings and investments, right? And what they're each used for. Like you go into definitions around that. So I don't want to give any spoilers here, but that's gold. It's just gold. And it seems so obvious. Like it seems like you should be able to Google savings. What does savings mean? What does investment mean? And get like some pretty direct and clear answers. But it's just not, because it's so like ambiguous, because it's such vast, such big concepts, right? But the way you break it down is so simple, and um, and I have seen it in your students. I mean, it clicked for me, but I've also seen other people have, that it's clicked for, where it's like, oh my gosh, how did I not know this? How did this, And so just having that alone first is like foundational. And then having the formula, which is the 80-20-80, 20-80-20, that is the formula. So it's like once you know the numbers, the percentages that you need to be pulling into, and so 20-80-20 is like the overarching formula, but those actually break down, right? So we break those down further. So the 20 becomes 15 and 5. The 80, it splits up as well into 20 and 80, which is good, but neither here nor there. And then the other 20 breaks down into 5, 5, 5, and 5 if you have debt. So when we talk about 20-80-20, I don't want people to think that it's even that simplistic, because it gets even more specific, and that's where the empowerment is. It's to be able to say, okay, X amount is coming into my household income every month from whether it's a W-2 or you're paying yourself out of your company, X amount's coming in, and you take that X amount and then what happens from there and how much you put where is the magic of it's the very practical magic of Curbs.
I love it. Well, to wrap this up, and you said the practical magic, and I love those two words together because
It was a great movie back in the day, but yes.
And there's a kind of a maxim or a saying that says structure creates freedom.
Yeah.
And a mentor of mine, Gary Keller, taught me that, because it's counterintuitive a little bit. It seems like structure is the opposite of freedom when things are too structured. But when he really taught me when he said that to me is one of my early mentors, and then explained to me how it worked. I've held that for my whole life, is that even in the most esoteric spiritual realms, there's still structure. That's what we break things down to. Astrology, it's all based on the science and the math and the lines and the structure. And so our money, to have financial freedom, what we don't understand, it requires a lot of structure. And ultimately, that's what Curbs is the structure that creates the freedom, along with the clarity. Like you said, we have to have clarity of numbers and have this clear path. And that's what's missing with so much of the other work, is there's just not the structure. We can't follow. There's not a pattern to follow that allows us to do something. And like any recipe, when we're first learning to cook, we follow others' recipes, but the more we get in it, the more we understand the chemistry and science behind it and underneath it. And now we can, create our own recipes. But again, we have to understand the chemistry to be a good cook. And that's, again, but the beginning structure allows us to start having results without necessarily understanding all the chemistry and science that's underneath. But make no mistake that there's not chemistry or science underneath that just because you don't understand it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I kind of want to share too that, that I even knew there needed to be structure, and I even educated on structures, right? I think that when it comes to, so there's the practical kind of response to that Curbs offers, which is not just a general structure, but a highly specific structure. And then on top of that, I think another huge value of Curbs is the handholding to implement that structure. I mean, that to me, that's like one of the biggest differences between Curbs and Reading Profit First and hiring a CPA and is this program is like, literally you holding people's hands through it. And that is, that's just incredible. But I also want to speak to the less practical aspect of things that really was holding me back for so long, forever until now, until the last few years, which is, it was more of the, like I said before, a lot of what I built was coming from a place of like more of a like, and this is just me, this will not apply to some people, but it will apply to others. And it's like where motivation comes from. And if motivation is driven from wounds or shadow, needing to prove it, feeling like not good enough or not smart enough or whatever. I mean, we all have certain limiting beliefs and core wounds. And that's why people study those kinds of things, especially when they're pushing for new levels of achievement and success. Things come up for people. And for me, I rebelled against structure. So I needed to be in the chaos in order to feel safe, even though the result of that was that my finances were also, they weren't even that chaotic. It was just that I couldn't ever quite get ahead. I was like, I would try, but I had such a poor relationship with structure. I was still in such a rebellion against it. It hurt me to apply structure before. And so it wasn't until like I did that excavation and the healing on some of those core wounds that allowed me to then embrace the structure, apply it, and completely change everything. Right. So one side of things, I wanted to bring that up because it's always two parts. There's the practical, but then there's also what's happening internally. And that's where, when we talk about mindset coaching, that's what it is. Mindset is one thing, and that is like the hot term. But I also really like to look at it from an embodiment perspective, because you can train your mind to do a lot of things. But if your body doesn't believe them as truth, if it hasn't settled in your nervous system, then habits and patterns won't actually change. So that's the value of like coupling Curbs and coaching, right? When you have Curbs as the structure, but you also have someone able to hold you in true coaching, which is that inquiry into what is standing in your way to making these changes. I mean, this is where like Wealthy Wellthy does an amazing job with people.
Awesome, girl. Well, we'll close here. Any final words? So again, everybody listening, if you are ready for a money breakthrough call with coaching call with with me, probably more consulting for a real coaching call with Emily. We're putting a link below just to get on Emily's calendar and really do this, just do a real coaching call. Emily's an expert at coaching, help you any breakthrough. And then we'll determine if Curbs is a good fit or not, but it's not about signing up for Curbs. It's just understanding that there is a solution if you are in the month to month. But if the first step is just to get a little clearing and get a little coaching, that's what we're here for, to get you started on this journey to to really start helping your money grow and to get out of this month to month
Yeah,
that people stay in for their entire lives.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's great.
All right, Emily, any final words of wisdom you'd like to say before we wrap up?
I just want to reiterate what you said. I really liked what you said about it's not about necessarily going into curbs. It's about receiving the inquiry from a coach in this world that helps you figure out what you actually what might be standing in your way for your own, financial health and wellness. And so, I said something about, pitching you for being salesperson. Yeah, I am a salesperson for Wealthy Wellthy. And any good salesperson, like you're in real estate, and like I've worked with a lot of real estate agents, and like the best real estate agents, they're not there to like sell you the house that they need to sell. They like will be in your life for as long as you want them to be, and they'll just be there for you for all the questions, for all the things, because eventually you'll probably buy with that person, right? When they're there for you. So any great salesperson is not going to sit there to try to just sell a person. So like, I just wanted to kind of disclaim that when we're offering a coaching call, that's what it is. And if Curbs winds up being a good fit, then I will tell you about that. But that might not be the answer. And it's only like up to you to come to the call and discover what might be standing in your way.
Awesome. Well, Emily, thank you for this. And I'm so excited to work together and to just really help people transform their money story. So
Yeah.
thank you
Thanks. Me
for
too,
coming on
Christina.
board.
Thank
Awesome.
you.